Welcome to this episode of Intellectual Conservatism. Today I'm here with Gaven Kerr. We're going to talk about 11 questions that have been submitted to him on kind of like, an Ask Me Anything type of format. And before we get started, I just want to apologize. It's been a month since I've uploaded a video. The reason why is not because I've been slacking, although I did have a week-long break. But during that week-long break, I was, organizing, future interviews such as the one that you're seeing today. I'm having on special guests to talk about various issues. And let's see here. I did a debate on Pints with Aquinas against Stephen Nimesh on whether or not Christ established an infallible magisterium. And so I'm going on various podcasts and YouTube channels. And so I'm doing a lot of things. I'm working on a paper. I'm trying to finish my papacy book. There's a lot going on. And so please, I'm not slacking. But anyway, I'm here today with Gaven Kerr, and I've had Gaven on multiple times before. He is probably the coolest Thomist that I've ever met. You came back from boxing training, right, or a kung fu training, and so and so your wrist is a little hurt from what I've heard, right? And so how's that coming along? You're doing a fight tomorrow, right? And so
well. Yes, so I'm just back from a Kung Fu class. So Kung Fu class was 6:30 to 7:30 tonight, and so we're starting around about 9 o'clock. So I just got in, got myself together, got my dinner, but a lot of it was sort of boxing work, and we were doing a lot of work on the pads. But then he put me on the heavy sort of the ball, filled with water, and just there was so much power work going on at it, and my wrist wasn't wrapped up. So when I took my gloves off, my wrist was just shaking. And I've got a session tomorrow. I've got a private session tomorrow, and I talked about, doing rounds tomorrow. So usually when we do rounds, it's boxing, kickboxing, MMA, grappling, all of that. So it has to be improved. It'll be fine by tomorrow, but it's just It's very weak at the minute, squeezing stuff, lifting my coffee is difficult. But yeah. So I'm just back from that. So yeah, hopefully I'll still be on top form for this anyway.
Yeah. And do you have any opinions about Conor McGregor?
I do. And now, so I'm in Belfast. He's in Dublin, so he's 100 miles away from me, so he can't come and beat me up. I don't know. I mean, so to me, martial arts, it's not a sport. I see the sporting side of martial arts where you want to test your skill with others in a safe and controlled environment, and you train all year, or you enter a fight camp, 12 weeks before for that. And I can see that is an important aspect of martial arts, boxing, in particular. And then you have the Olympic martial arts. So I get that. That's great. But to me, martial arts, well, because I do Kung Fu, which grew out of a kind of a monastic sort of institution at the Shaolin Temple. And I've always had an affinity, a like for traditional martial arts, which if they didn't grow out of that sort of monastic discipline, they did grow out of a military discipline. And they've always carried with them not just the idea of, winning in a competition, but self-improvement, greater mastery over self, and so growth and virtue. Martial arts have always signified that for me, that you become a better version of yourself in doing martial arts. So when I look at Conor McGregor and I look at some of his antics, maybe I just don't see that self-mastery. There's certainly a self-mastery when it comes to the fighting and the fitness and everything, but the inner character, it could all just be a show. Because it is a product that a lot of these fighters are selling. I don't see an awful lot of inner mastery, of the inner character, a growth and virtue with the inner character. And I think that's maybe missing. So I'm sure unbelievably talented, but maybe there could be more sort of reflection on growth and character.
Right.
That would maybe be my opinion.
And I guess like the big question everyone wants to know is that if you did get into a fight with Conor McGregor, do you think you would win?
No, I don't think I would. I mean, I would do my best. I would land it. I wouldn't make it easy for him, but I don't know. I don't think I would win. Although he's not a grappler, isn't he? Not. He's a striker. And a lot of the sort of work I do with my master is, there's a lot of grappling work, and I'm also doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well.
Yeah.
So, I would give as good as I get. I wouldn't make it easy for him, put it that way. But I mean, fighters like that, who have been training all their lives, at the highest sort of level, I mean, he's going to have his way with me if he wants. Yeah.
Well, there's one area that he can't beat you in, and that's in Thomistic metaphysics. And so I think we can get into the 11 questions that people submitted. And so originally I wanted to do 10, but then I had a patron kind of, come in, and so I didn't want to deny a patron.
Yeah.
And so, I'll actually say the names of the people who asked the questions. And so, they get a little shout out, and we'll go through each of them just in order as I have it to you. Okay, so here's the first question. It was submitted by Benjamin David Stowell. And here's the question. So I'm reading verbatim. He said, "It seemed that a point of disagreement in his discussion with Josh Rasmussen on Pat Flynn's show was epistemological. Claiming there is a proof of God's existence seems to entail that non-believers are non-believers because they fail to understand the proof. Therefore, non-believers are either ignorant or irrational. But atheist philosophers seem to be highly rational and well-informed. So therefore, should we not speak of proofs or therefore should we not speak of proofs or demonstrations of God's existence, but simply of compelling reasons to believe?" And I know you and Josh did talk about that a little bit, and you did offer an answer. And so, what would you say in response to Benjamin's question here?
Yeah. So I've always found it odd that if you defend the idea that you can prove something, then automatically somebody who doesn't accept the proof is deemed ignorant or irrational. I've always found that attitude odd, because I do believe that you can, present a proof of something, but it doesn't mean that somebody who disagrees with a proof is, as Benjamin says here, ignorant or irrational. First of all, on the positive point, can we have, proper proof of God? Well, I take a proof, say, in metaphysics, and in this case, proof of God, to be a demonstrative syllogism. Okay, so it's a syllogism which gives us scientific knowledge, and so is demonstrative, and it has a number of conditions laid down upon it. But principally, you have a middle term which connects up a major with a minor term. And, Aristotle and Thomas following him in posterior analytics and in Thomas's commentary on the posterior analytics, he distinguishes between two types of demonstrative proof. There's propter quid demonstrative proof. So that's knowledge of why, or knowledge of the reasoned cause. You don't just know the fact, but you know the reason for the fact. And then there's demonstration quia, where you just know it's a proof of the fact. And I do think that you can have a quia demonstration for the existence of God. You can reason from effects to cause, and and we've looked at that with yourself and on a number of different podcasts, and those arguments are fairly well rehearsed. So in that context, yeah, I think you can have a demonstrative proof for God's existence. But what does that tell us then about somebody who doesn't accept the proof? Well, all that it really tells us is that they don't accept the proof. Why do they not accept the proof? Well, could it be that they don't accept the premises? They might disagree. They might dispute the premises. Okay. They may not accept the argumentation. They may not accept that the demonstrative syllogism is demonstrative. I mean, they may not accept the logic of demonstration. I mean, that's, up for grabs, and we can argue about that. And, logicians do that all the time. So, the posterior analytics is not an easy book to follow. So there's a lot of different twists and turns that we can make in that. So, we could, argue over that. They may not accept the argumentative framework out of which the proof emerges. So they might not accept the metaphysics, say the metaphysics of essence and existence. For instance, an objection which, is, being put forth is existential inertia objection. That existential inertia objection only makes sense if we don't accept Aquinas's metaphysics out of which the proof emerges. So, there's somebody who doesn't accept the proof because they don't accept the background metaphysics. All these are reasons for rejecting the proof. And insofar as there are reasons put forth for the rejection of the proof, one who puts them forth is being rational. But I would just say that whilst that person is being rational, they're just wrong. So they just don't, they're just not in the right, but they're, in a sense, they're rationally not in the right, or they're wrong in a rational way. And, that somebody can be wrong in a rational manner, it's clear from logic, because the logical form can be correct, but you can still end up generating false conclusions. So rationality isn't always tied to being right, because there's lots of people who are thoroughly rational who just, entertain wrong conclusions. And I imagine I would hope the atheist philosopher would grant me the same sort of charity, that the atheist philosopher thinks I'm wrong, but yet I would still hope the atheist philosopher thinks that, I'm rational. So I think we can talk about proofs, positively speaking, for God's existence, but that doesn't mean that somebody that doesn't accept them is irrational or ignorant. Now, there could be people who don't accept the proofs because they just don't get the reasoning. And they don't get the reasoning because they're committed, for some sort of reason, they're committed to not affirming the existence of God. And it's for this non-rational reason that they just won't affirm the existence of God. Maybe that existential choice is too much for them. So that would be a non-rational reason for denying the proof. So there would be no rational justification for denying the proof in that account. Doesn't exactly make the person irrational, because I don't think black and white we can say that a person is irrational. But I think it certainly would mean that the choice not to accept the conclusion is an irrational choice. It's not informed by proper reason. Some people could be ignorant, and that happens. So certainly atheist philosophers are well informed. How well informed are they on Thomistic metaphysics? Ignorant can be maybe a pejorative term. Just taken in a strict sense, it just means that, not being in a state of unknowing. And so, I mean, a lot of atheist philosophers, are just in a state of unknowing, of, Thomistic metaphysics or whatever metaphysics that it is, which informs, these proofs for the existence of God. So, I mean, it could be out of ignorance that somebody just, denies arguments for the existence of God, because maybe they've come to reject just metaphysics simpliciter, and they just, aren't interested in that area of philosophy. And given that they're not interested in that area of philosophy, and they're not engaged with the debates, just, the arguments for the existence of God just aren't a going concern for them. And so that could be a case where somebody rejects, God's existence out of a kind of ignorance of a certain area of philosophy. But again, that doesn't make them irrational. You can still be thoroughly reasonable in doing. You can still be a thoroughly reasonable individual, but maybe that choice is, not a rational choice, because it's made in an uninformed kind of way. How does that sound, Swan?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot that I was also thinking about in just the question and also the answer that you gave, because I think about there's actually a quote by the physicist Alexander Vilenkin, where he says, basically he's talking about his proof for the finitude of the past. Right. And he says something like, they say that reasons are what convince a reasonable man, but a proof is what can convince even a fool, or whatever. And so it's something like when you say proof, it has this absoluteness to it, where it's like, if you don't see it, then you're worse than the fool, right? Who can't be moved by reasons. And so there's that hierarchy there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I don't like that notion, because to me, a proof just establishes the conclusion as true, as having been demonstrated to be true. If somebody doesn't accept the proof, right, they don't accept it. Acceptance is something different than the proof itself. So the proof, it's not going to coerce somebody into accepting it, because there's all sorts of reasons why somebody may not accept a proof. Maybe some of those reasons, are reasonable, but maybe some of them are unreasonable. Maybe it involves, existential choices that one has to make. And we also need to distinguish between proof and certainty. Maybe somebody would demand a high level of certainty before they'll accept the conclusion of a proof. So maybe they see the proof as demonstrative, but maybe they want a greater degree of certainty than what the proof may offer. And so again, that would be reasons for rejecting the proof. I do think the proof, a demonstrative proof, is the strongest. It's probably the strongest that you can get in philosophy for accepting a conclusion. If you have a demonstrative proof for something, then your acceptance of what that demonstrative proof gives you is pretty much solid. And then, so I do believe there's a hierarchy in that respect. But I think convincing people to accept a proof and the proof being a demonstrative proof are two different things.
Yeah, can you define what a demonstrative proof is again in your sense, just really quick?
So a demonstrative proof is a demonstrative syllogism. So it involves a middle term, a subjective demonstration, and something which is affirmed of the subjective demonstration, and the middle term serves to connect up the subjective demonstration with what is affirmed of it. So, we're all familiar with the Socrates syllogism: all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So men is the middle term of that demonstration. And so you see something affirmed of the middle term in the first premise, and then you see the middle term affirmed of Socrates in the second premise. So given that Socrates is one of the things that are mortal, and that we know the things that are mortal, given that Socrates is one of the things that are mortal, i.e. men, and we know that, men are mortal, we can affirm mortality of Socrates. That's a demonstrative proof. And then you can go into, how the middle term relates to the subjective demonstration. So in a propter quid syllogism, the middle term tells us something about the nature of the subject. So the middle term, men, tells us something about the very essence of Socrates. We know why Socrates is mortal, because he's one of the things that are mortal. Men being animals, are subject to mortality. So we don't just know the fact of Socrates' mortality, say if he had died. We know why Socrates is mortal, because he is the kind of thing that he is a man. And then on the other hand, you've got, the quia demonstrations, which just give you the fact of something. But all in all, that's what a demonstrative proof is. It's a demonstrative syllogism.
Yeah, and this will be my last comment on this question. But how familiar are you with the cognitive science literature on like how people reason, and especially intelligent, highly sophisticated people? What leads them to believe or not believe certain things?
Just very superficially.
Yeah.
I've only really engaged with it, just in doing philosophy of mind, and even then, it's just in a dark corner of philosophy of mind, which looks at whether or not people are fundamentally, rational or subject to logical norms. But other than that, I haven't engaged with it at all.
Yeah, because there's like a well-known phenomenon that like very intelligent people actually do have a pretty significant blind spot because they're so brilliant, like they could basically convince themselves of anything and come up with all the colorful proofs and arguments that they can. And so I remember there was an economist that I liked a lot named Richard Epstein, and he talked about when he was at Yale, he had to deal with like some really liberal economists. And he said they had the ability to rationalize the impossible because they were so brilliant. And he said, like, yeah, they were smarter than I was, but they were denying like just basic tenets of reality to get their plans. But they knew how to manipulate the equations and get the arguments and get published. And they were beautiful writers and so on and so forth. And so not to say that they were sophists, but like they were brilliant people, but they were wrong.
Yeah, that would sort of tie in with the philosophy of science literature, especially what's his name, Kuhn, and paradigm shifts. That science advances through paradigms, and it's not so much through scientific discovery that science advances, but it's through allegiance to the paradigm, and it's whether or not the paradigm will, is able to answer all the questions that we find to be significant. And, given that notion of paradigm, it could be the case that, some paradigms are ideologically driven, which seems to be what, you're suggesting there, that there could be, certain ideologies, which means that maybe, certain questions are overlooked, or maybe certain questions are not seen to be as important ones. And we only have these important questions, and our paradigm answers that perfectly. Or these are the questions we find important. Our paradigm doesn't answer this, so we need to move to a new paradigm.
Yeah.
So what you describe would fit in with that sort of literature.
All right. Awesome. Here's the second question for you, Gavin.
Okay.
What are the strongest arguments against Aristotelian Thomist metaphysics? And this was submitted by, if I butchered names, I'm sorry, but it's Alex Hening. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah. So Aristotelian metaphysics and then Aquinas's metaphysics, they are realist metaphysics. So it's a metaphysics where we look out at things in the world and we think about them metaphysically. And there's a particular cognitive operation that Thomists call separatio, which allows us to think about the metaphysical features of things. And the reason why Thomas calls that cognitive operation separatio, as opposed to just abstraction, we don't just abstract the metaphysical features, we separate the metaphysical features, is because in abstraction, what we abstract, okay, we consider independently of matter and motion, but they cannot be or be understood without matter and motion. So the subject matter of physics and mathematics, we abstract, because the subject matter of physics and mathematics, we can think and abstract it from matter and motion, but it cannot be or be understood without the matter and motion. But the subject matter of metaphysics, it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be understood to be in matter and motion. So in itself, it's independent and can be thought and understood independently of matter and motion. So we use a special cognitive operation called separatio. So all in all, what we do is we look at things in the world, the medium-sized dry goods, and we think about them in terms of being substances, having accidents, standing in causal relations, being composed of essence and existence, act and potency, all of that. And that's how we do metaphysics. So our springboard is the world. But now, what if we have a philosophical position that says that we don't have access to the world, or we don't have reliable access to the world? Well, that kind of metaphysics is in jeopardy. And what if that philosophical position says, until we can give an account of how we have access to the world and just what kind of access to the world that might be, we have to put metaphysics on hold. We may even need to abandon metaphysics and, say that it's impossible. And so I think that's the strongest challenge to Aristotelian and Thomistic metaphysics. And by the way, I don't see those two as synonymous. I don't see Aristotelian metaphysics to be synonymous with Thomistic metaphysics. So I would say Aristotelian and Thomistic metaphysics. But in any case, I think that's the strongest challenge, and those challenges come from modern philosophy. So Descartes, Hume, Kant, thinkers like those, I think, present the greatest challenge to metaphysics. Kant in particular, and the reason why I say Kant in particular is because I think Kant is the greatest ally of the Thomist when it comes to epistemology. For reasons, I was actually on a podcast last night where we were talking about this Thomistic epistemology and how a certain tradition of Kantian and post-Kantian philosophy led by the Pittsburgh School really resonates with Aquinas' epistemology. So Kant is such an ally there, but then he's such an enemy, because for Kant, the world is constituted out of the conceptual capacities that we use to understand it. So we constitute the world ourselves out of those conceptual capacities. So we can't engage in any metaphysics which goes beyond the bounds of sense, because the bounds of sense are the bounds of our conceptual capacities. So Kant really does clip the wings of the metaphysicians. And so we just can't do Thomistic metaphysics on the Kantian account, despite the fact that Kant is such an ally when it comes to epistemology. And that might raise some questions for some people, but if you want details of the podcast I was on last night, we really thrashed that out over 2.5 hours. So yeah, I think Kant, is particularly challenging because there's so much which is good there, but then so much that we have to untangle from what's good and reject. But then the other guys as well, Descartes, Hume, Locke, people like that, just as a movement in philosophy, that's got to be the strongest challenge.
Yeah, and I'm trying to organize a conversation between you and Rob Koons on post-Kantian Thomistic metaphysics post-Kant,
Yeah.
And I'm interested though, I tried to get the author of, I think it was Aquinas after Frege or something like that. And so with Frege, how similar is he to Kant?
Frege, yeah. So I wouldn't say he's all that similar. He's working in that post-Kantian tradition, but he's coming at a time where it was felt that the Kantian approach and the German approach in general, Kant and Hegel as the main representatives, had kind of gone stale or stagnant, and we needed to take a new approach in philosophy. And so Frege emerges and Husserl emerges, and one of the main issues in German philosophy is meaning or significance or intelligibility. Where does that come from and how is it mediated? And Husserl he thought, if we kind of, engage in phenomenology, the analysis of intentionality and the analysis of our intentional states, we can give an account of meaning and significance. And Husserl was a very Cartesian thinker in that respect. Frege, on the other hand, thought that, we can look to mathematics and we can look to language as giving us a systematic account of meaning and significance. And so the categories which play such an important role in Kant in unifying knowledge are no longer these sort of a priori categories, part of the transcendental ego's work in unifying the manifold of intuition. Rather, the unity of our knowledge is seen to be disclosed through, mathematics and the analysis of language, particularly, sense and reference, Frege's famous paper. So issues like that then became apparent. How is it that we can have distinct senses, and the same referent, for those distinct senses. So Frege, he's coming out of that tradition, that post-Kantian tradition, but I don't see, at least from what I know of Frege, an awful lot of a connection with Kant. But I could be wrong there. I'm not a Frege expert.
All right, let's go to the third question. So the third question is, this was submitted by Mark Olivero. He asks, why is Thomas's De Ente Argument better than Anselm's Ontological Argument? And then he said, extra points if you use a Marvel or DC analogy to illustrate your thesis. And so I hope you're familiar with comic books, Gavin.
Right. I'm not really familiar with comic books, but I have heard of Marvel and DC. So, okay. So why is Thomas's De Ente Argument, or I suppose in general, Aquinas' way to God, why is that better than Anselm's Ontological Argument? Well, the reason why I think it's better is because, first of all, from a methodological point of view, it's got a systematic metaphysics behind it, and that metaphysics is realist metaphysics. So it's a metaphysics which is drawn from our knowledge of the world as it is in itself, essence, existence, act, potency, causality, and all of that. And it carefully lays out its reasoning for the existence of God within that metaphysics itself. So I think that's, something that it has in its favor. The second is that
Hey, Gavin. Hey, so my internet got a little messed up. And so you were on your second point and then it cut out. So hopefully that won't happen again, but let's see. So second point.
So the second point is that Anselm is very much interested in just giving us a nice, neat, efficient proof to begin with and then move on. So it has to be a proof that anybody could accept without presupposition. And that's why, he gives, this a priori definition of God is that in which nothing greater can be conceived, which everybody would accept, presumably. And then just from that definition, he goes on to demonstrate the existence of God. But Aquinas, he's not doing that. Aquinas is concerned to prove the existence of God, but he's got lots of other concerns as well. He wants to do systematic philosophy and systematic theology. And the proof for the existence of God is worked out within the philosophy that he's doing. It's not just, a side quest. It's not something that he is sort of, being sent, to do independently of his main sort of work. So we want, sort of a Marvel or a DC analogy. Bruce Wayne or Green Arrow. What's Green Arrow's real name? Well, Oliver Queen. Mm-hmm. Oliver Queen. Yeah. Yeah, so they've got their main jobs. Well, Oliver Queen didn't. He was a billionaire, but, he becomes mayor. Is it, what's the name of the city? Is it the Angel City or something like that?
Oh, man, they're going to crucify me. I forgot. Let me find this. Green Arrow City. It's Star City.
Star City, yeah. So he's got his job. That's the main thing that he's doing. Bruce Wayne has his work that he's doing as CEO or whatever of Wayne Enterprises, and that's their main work. And then their side sort of work, their side hustle is being these sort of superheroes, okay, these crusaders, right? So sometimes, when philosophers seek to prove the existence of God, it's like the side hustle It's the side quest. It's the dressing up in the Green Arrow outfit or the Batman outfit and going and taking care of business, but it's not their main enterprise. Okay. Thomas's main enterprise is doing the philosophy, doing the metaphysics, and within that main enterprise, he proves the existence of God. So the dialectical context within which this proof for the existence of God occurs is at some stage within the enterprise of doing metaphysics, of working out substance, potency, form, and act. And oh, look, we'll work out the existence of God as well within this. It's not a side quest. So Thomas doesn't have to get dressed up in his, proving the existence of God, uniform, to go out and take care of business. He'll just, sort of do his business, which as, professor of theology is to do every branch of philosophy and, do the systematic theology as well. So that's the second reason why I think Aquinas's De Ente proof is better than Anselm's ontological argument. The third reason, and probably this is the most important reason why I think Aquinas's proof is better, is because it's true. It works. It demonstrates the existence of God, whereas Anselm's ontological argument doesn't demonstrate the existence of God. And I think that's a pretty major issue right there, that, Anselm's argument presupposes that we can have, direct intuition of God's divine essence and know it as that in which nothing greater can be conceived, from which then we can deduce God's existence. That seems like a propter quid proof of God's existence. But since we can't know the essence of God, then a propter quid proof of his existence is unavailable to us. So we can only have a quia demonstration, or one which moves from effects to cause. So an argument, leading to a true conclusion, I think, is a pretty important marker of its status. And whilst the conclusion of Anselm's argument that God exists is itself true, Anselm's argument doesn't demonstrate the truth of that conclusion. So I think that's a problem for it.
Is that Aquinas' critique of Anselm, or what was his argument or objection to Anselm's proof?
Yeah, so his critique of Anselm was something like that. Aquinas points out that it's not the case that everybody understands by the essence of God that in which nothing greater can be conceived. He holds that, that requires some sort of, knowledge of the essence of God. It requires that, we're able to have some sort of direct insight, some intuition into the nature of God. And Aquinas holds that, we just can't have that. It would only be the case that, God's existence is self-evident in that way to us if we already know that God exists, or if we, we're standing face to face to God. So, yeah, I mean, Thomas does, reject the ontological argument for God's existence in question 2 of the Summa. I can look up which article it is. It's in one of those articles in question 2. It's prior to the third article where he, puts forth his 5 ways, but it's in one of those articles. I think it's in whether or not God is self-evident. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah, there it is there. So objection 2 to Article 1, Aquinas' response. Perhaps not everyone who hears the word God understands it to signify something in which nothing greater can be thought, seeing that some have believed God to be a body. Yet granted that everyone understands that by this word God is signified something in which nothing greater can be thought, nevertheless, it doesn't therefore follow that he understands that what the word signifies actually exists. So, you could use that definition in a descriptional sense, but it doesn't mean that you're committed to the referent of what that description picks out. So it could be, it may be that he doesn't understand that what the word signifies exists actually, but only that it exists mentally. Nor can it be argued that it actually exists unless it be admitted that there actually exists something in which nothing greater can be thought, and this precisely is not admitted by those who hold that God does not exist. So yeah, Aquinas, he rejects Anselm's argument, and that's why.
All right, let's go to the fourth question now, Gavin, if you're ready. So the fourth question is, how does the Thomistic tradition account for the existence of matter when God is immaterial? And then he adds in, this is Patric Peters. He adds in, if all that exists is a reflection of God and must somehow pre-exist in God via principle, proportion, and causality, or, then in what sense is this true of matter? I think this is a fun question. So yeah,
Yeah.
Gavin, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on it?
Yeah. So the first thing to point out is that creation is not emanation. So it's not the case that, creatures just flow or emanate from the divine essence the way, light emanates from the sun. Okay. So creation isn't emanation. Creation is willed creation. So God understands, every possibility of being, and he wills some of those possibilities to be. So given that creation isn't emanation, it is not the case that, whatever, is in creation has to be in God in some sort of a real sense, in the way that, what emanates has to be in that from which it is emanated in some real sense. So how do we account for the existence of matter? Well, God is omnipotent, so he can bring matter out of nothing. He can literally originate matter and grant existence to it because he wills it. He sees it as a possibility of being, and so he wills it to be. So then, onto the second part of the question: if all that exists is a reflection of God and must somehow pre-exist in God, then in what sense is this true of matter? So, in what sense is it a reflection of God? Well, it's a possibility of being. It's something that could possibly be. And Aquinas, in the Summa Theologiae, question 14, article 11. So I was actually reading this article the other day. So question 14, article 11. The answer to the third objection actually, deals with this issue. And Thomas says, although matter falls away from a similitude to God according to its potentiality, it nevertheless, insofar as it has esse, it nevertheless bears a certain similitude to the divine esse. In other words, matter is something which, in being made actual, bears a certain similitude to God in its actuality, but not in its materiality, not in its potentiality, but in its actuality. It bears a certain similitude to God. And what's that similitude? Well, that it's a possibility of being. It's something that could be brought to be. And so it's open to God's power to be. But the similitude is not in the potentiality, its material potentiality, but in the actuality that the matter has. So that's how it bears a certain similitude to God.
Yeah, and so then maybe two questions here to kind of flow from this one real quick. I mean, so, the first question emphasizes the immateriality of God versus the materiality of creation. And so what you're saying is that what matters more is not, God is immaterial. He's not, composed of matter and form, whereas, creation has this composition. Your point is that the way that you get over this kind of dichotomy is through esse. It's through being itself. That's what kind of unites it together.
Yeah, exactly. It's sometimes thought that, it's easier for God to create immaterial things than it is to create material things, because material things seem to be more like God than material things. But a point that I made in my creation book, and which is sort of coming out here, well, it's that it's just as easy for God to make material and immaterial things. The chasm between material and immaterial creatures and God is just as great, because both are composites of essence and existence. Okay. And so for God to create a material or an immaterial thing is to grant existence to the thing that he creates. Now, the things that he creates, let's say an angel or a material substance, they may be metaphysically complex. Okay. But metaphysically complex or metaphysically simple, for those to be created is for God to grant existence to them. And so it's existence that crosses the chasm, of God to creatures, not materiality or immateriality. And so insofar as creatures are brought about by granting existence to them, and God grants existence to what he wills, he can grant existence to material things.
Yeah, and then also to the second part of the question too, when it talks about whatever, since all that exists is a reflection of God in some sense, but how does matter pre-exist in God? I think the one point that I would think about too is that if God creates something that is truly different from himself, right? There can only be one thing that is pure act, right? And so everything else is going to have some kind of composition if it's not God. Like that's one of the principal markers, and so it's going to have that act, potency, essence, existence, composition. And so it's going to be it's going to have to be different from God if God creates it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, everything other than God that exists is composite. but the composition doesn't have a similitude in God. The composition isn't pre-contained in God in any way. Rather, God sees that, and whatever he has created, or, whatever he could create is open to his power to create. He sees that precisely because such things could have existence. And matter is, one of those realities that can have existence.
Yeah, so maybe like the potency in creation, it could be a reflection of divine freedom, perhaps, in God, or...
Well, so the potency in creation, the only potency or potentiality, or potentia, the Latin potentia, which pre-exists creation, is God's active potency. And then when God creates, you have passive potency in the creature. Now, the thing is, when God creates, he doesn't, do it, the way you bake a cake. He doesn't put all the ingredients together and then produce the thing. So it's not like, right, we need some essence, we need some matter, we need some form, and let's put that all together and give existence to it. Thomas holds that when God creates, he brings about the substance whole and complete. So if you have a metaphysically complex substance, matter, form, accident, all of that, all those components are co-created in the thing. Having been created, we can then analyze the different levels of act, potency, dependency in the thing. But it's not like, we have God's like, right, here's a bit of matter, here's a bit of form, let's put that together and give existence to it. That's not what happens. God creates it all at once, and then we can analyze it accordingly. The best analogy for thinking about this is one that comes from St. Augustine and, interestingly, J.R.R. Tolkien, that God's creating is kind of like singing a song. So think about when you sing a song, right? So a music, a tune is formed matter. It's formed air vibrations, all right? But you don't, in singing, you don't emit the air vibrations and then form them. They're always emitted as formed, but nevertheless, we can distinguish between the form of the vibration and the vibration itself. Okay, we can do that, even though from the moment that, the song is uttered, it's always formed our vibrations. And that's an analogy that Augustine uses, for God's creation, that everything he creates is already composed the way that it's composed. It's never separate. And then we can analyze it after the fact of creations occurring. And you find the same in Tolkien in the Silmarillion, when the one, or the Iluvatar, creates, he does so through song.
That's awesome. All right, number 5. Does God... Okay, and this is from John Michael, or John DeRosa, as another name he goes by. Does God's knowledge change? And if not, then how does he know that he created the world, since the world didn't always exist, contra what Aquinas seems to have believed, right? So... Yeah.
So, no, God's knowledge doesn't change. Why does God's knowledge not change? Because whenever God knows, what he knows is his divine essence. Okay, so whenever you know something, you deploy an intelligible species in order to know it. So if I know the cup in front of me, or the tree outside, or whatever, I have the intelligible species, the conceptual content of the cup or of the tree. Okay, and those are abstracted from those objects. So we abstract by means of our agent intellect the forms of those things. We have the intelligible species, and that's what gives us an intellectual grasp of the thing. All right. God, on the other hand, the intelligible species of God's understanding is not abstracted from things. It's the divine essence itself. So whereas for us, the intelligible species that we abstract from things, that's like the lens, the intelligible lens by which we see the things intelligently. For God, the intelligible species is the divine essence. And so God, in understanding the divine essence, understands everything to be understood. Now, some of the things to be understood are the things that God has created. Those things that God has created, then, God understands them to be subject to his power. Were there to be other things created, God would understand those to be subject to his power. Were there to be nothing created, God would understand nothing to be subject to his power. But here's the kick. The reason why God's knowledge remains the same is because God doesn't sort of have intelligible species of, these creatures subject to his power, those creatures subject to his power, no creatures subject to his power. Rather, he has the intelligible species just of the divine essence itself. It's because this intelligible species is not of the individuals. And so he doesn't understand the individuals through intelligible species proper to them. He understands the individuals through intelligible species that he himself is. And because he doesn't change, then regardless of how they change, his knowledge will remain the same.
Yeah, and that's what you mean when you say he wills the divine essence, right? He doesn't like look out and say, okay, I see a tree there, so I want more trees like that. He kind of looks into himself and he says, what is my will? What is my design? And then proceeds from there.
Yeah, exactly. And precisely because that will, and so we're getting onto the will now, that will is multiply analyzable. So think about, when you will to do something, you can have the same will and it can be multiply analyzable. So the same will or the same motivation in God can result in lots of different sort of situations within creation, or no situation in creation as well. I mean, there's cases where you can will something and nothing occurs, yet you still will the thing. And that's the case with God as well, because he wills the divine essence. Anything other than the divine essence, which is in existence, has been willed by God, but only in a secondary way, as a non-necessary means for his willing the divine essence.
Yeah, and I think, this is a point that you've mentioned other times that when we've had this conversation on, especially like modal collapse arguments or something like that, where it's like creation relative to God. So the creation itself is contingent, right? Because it does depend upon God for its existence. Whereas in terms of God to creation, that relative relation, God is going to do what God does, right? And so he doesn't have to go from one event to another event of thought or contemplation before he creates. Rather, there's a perfect oneness of God.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this brings in the philosophy of agency, what it is to be agency, because a lot of the times we assume that mental events are causes of our actions. And that's a very popular picture. We assume that mental events are causes of our actions. And then we apply that to God and think, oh, well, look, if God has acted in this way, well, he must have had mental events X, Y, and Z. But what if in a different possible world he acted in a different way or didn't act at all? Then there must have been different mental events which caused him to act. But first of all, on the doctrine of simplicity, Aquinas denies that, there's any distinction between God's acting and God's power to act. Any real distinction anyway. Secondly, even in human action, why would you think that mental events are the causes of your actions? There's a lot of actions that we take and undertake without even thinking about them. There is no mental causality involved. So, you can give quaint examples, of getting up, going out of the room. And, John McDowell uses the example of playing speed chess. Anybody who plays speed chess, they're not thinking about what they're doing. But if they were stopped and asked, what are you doing? They could give a whole description of it. So an action is of an agent. It's an intentional action. If were you to stop and ask the agent, why are you doing that? The agent would be able to say, well, this is why I'm doing it. As opposed to, a non-intentional action is if, you stop the agent and said, why are you doing that? Then the agent would say, oh, I didn't know I was doing that. Like maybe scratching your beard or blinking too quickly or something like that. Or breathing really loudly. So those intentional actions are ones that, they answer a particular type of why question. And this is my Anscomian sort of approach coming in. But that doesn't mean that they have to have some sort of mental causation to them. So here's an example that everybody will understand. Whenever you're typing, whenever you're within the flow of typing, you're writing your papers, some people write thousands of words, and it just flows out. What's your intention? If anybody's like me in their writing, they've kind of got an idea of what and a motivation of what they want to write about, and they get in the page and they just start writing. And sometimes you don't even think about what you're writing, especially not the words. When was the last time you thought about spelling a word, that you're trying to write? Remember when you were young and you had to learn how to spell and maybe you had to learn how syllables fit together? When was the last time you did that? Your fingers just go. But if you have to if you make a mistake and have to stop yourself, you go back, oh, that's spelt wrong, So it's intentional, it's rational action, but it's not something that you're thinking about. And so there's no mental causation involved, yet it's the action of an agent. Now, what's the form of the action of the agent? it's the form of the action of the agent is in the patient. Okay, that's the form of the action. It's not any sort of mental event in me. It's in the patient as well. What's the patient of God's action? Okay, it's creatures. So what's the form of God's action? It's not some sort of mental event in him that causes him to act. It's the form of the creature itself, which is dependent on God by, that extrinsic real relation. Anyway, so that's kind of got us on to, God as an agent. But I think it's good to put our finger on that a lot of confusion results in the notion of God's agency if we think of agency in terms of mental causation bringing about our action. Even a human action, we don't even need to consider agency in that sort of way. So there's no need to apply it to God.
Right. We don't have to restrict it to just mental causes for actions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they can still be intelligible actions nonetheless.
Yeah. I would actually, deny that there is any kind of, mental causation. There is agent causation, and agent acts as cause, but I don't think there are mental causes.
I see. So you wouldn't even, you don't even think that the idea of putting the qualifier, mental agent causation, we don't really need the mental part. We just need the agent causation. That's what's really going on.
Yeah, we don't even need the mental part. I mean, because I don't believe in a mind. I don't believe that there are things called minds with,
right.
contents.
In the very technical sense, right, of what in analytic philosophy today. So you believe that there are intellects, right, but not like floating around or kind of these abstract entities in a way. Or okay.
Well, even then, I believe there are substances which are intelligent.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Intelligent is to be engaged in the world in a specific way. But maybe I would be a wee bit too Wittgensteinian for some people in that respect. Yeah, I'm very reticent about mentality and mind and all of that, because I think there's an awful lot of confusion about it.
All right, let's go to the sixth question. So this is from Mika Pianist, or maybe it's Mika, or I think it's Mika. So he asked the question: how can Aquinas philosophize about existence? It seems understanding depends on grasping the essences of things, but existence has no essence, since it is, I'm going to add, really distinct from essence.
Yeah. So thank you, Mika. So we've had a few engagements with Mika. He is very active, and I think he's emailed me as well. Always has very good, very pressing questions. So yeah, this is a good question. Joseph Owens wrote a book on this. It is called An Interpretation of Existence, which addresses this precise point. How can we get existence within our grasp in order to think about it and to philosophize about it and to have a philosophy of existence? And Micah is right. Existence is not grasped by means of understanding. Understanding, technically speaking, allows us to grasp the essences of things, what things are. So understanding is proportionate to essence. But there's a further cognitional act that Aquinas distinguishes, which is judgment. And the act of judgment directs our attention to the existence of the thing, because in the act of judgment, we take the essence, all right? So understanding, we understand a thing's essence. And then judgment, Aquinas calls it composing and dividing. What does he mean by that? We affirm something of the essence. We say something about the essence, about its state of being in the world. For example, Socrates is mortal. We're making a judgment there. We're saying something about Socrates' being. So judgment is a cognitional activity which directs our attention to the real existence of the thing, okay? And it has to, because when we judge, when we make an affirmation of something, we're moving away from simple intelligence, the simple understanding of something, to saying something about the nature of the world. So our attention is drawn to existence by means of the cognitional activity of judgment. And it's judgment then which brings the existence of things within our intellectual grasp. And in doing so, then we can, start thinking through existence, thinking about existence, and start, making affirmations about existence itself, such that it's distinct from essence. It's the principle of actuality of the essence. It's correlative to essence, and all the other things that we might want to say about existence. So existence is disclosed to us in judgment. It has to be, otherwise we wouldn't be able to make any affirmations or denials. So it's in judgment that we see that we peer into existence and can begin to philosophize about it. And Joseph Owens' book, An Interpretation of Existence, is kind of a study of that approach to existence.
Yeah, so in a sense, then, like, when we abstract or look at or make a judgment, right? You're saying that if it weren't for existence, then there would be
Mm.
nothing for the intellect to grasp at in the first place.
Yeah,
But then
yeah,
we can recognize that what the thing is different. Okay, so using Phasarian language,
mhm,
we can recognize that what the thing is separate from that it is, right?
uh-huh.
There's a real distinction between that and that.
Yeah, yeah. Although I might want to qualify that and say, yes, we do distinguish between what the thing is and that the thing is,
Mm-hmm.
but the that bit, the thatness of the thing,
Mm.
so long as the thatness of the thing is disclosed to us through the thing's real existence in the world. Okay, so it's not just the existence, it's not just the existence of judgment, but it's that judgment um, is directs its attention to real existence in the world. Okay, so it's not just logical affirmative
Right.
existence,
Yeah. Okay.
in that sort of Freudian sense of
Oh, okay.
instantiation, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Good.
actual
So,
real existence
yeah.
in the
So when you
world.
say real existence, you mean like the thing actually, like, when what do you mean by real existence there? Like, is it kind
Um,
of, yeah.
the being of the thing in the
Right.
world.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So judgment literally is directed to the being of the thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, because I noticed that even in my own, like, personal activities in philosophy, I noticed
Mhm.
that, like, sometimes I have language that's from kind of that more modern tradition, and so then that ends up causing a little slip up in terms of what's going on in the background of my philosophy. And so, yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
point to make. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, good.
All right, so question 7, this is from our friend Pat Flynn. He says, agree or disagree, and why? And then here's the statement that you either agree or disagree with. Aquinas holds to a theological externalism with reliabilist elements. And so this is an epistemological question. What's your
Yeah,
response?
yeah. So I had to ask Pat about this. I had to ask, what do you mean by this question? And then so he gave me the gist of it. So epistemological externalism is opposed to a view known as internalism. So internalism is the view that it's not any fact about the world which justifies our knowledge. Our knowledge is of facts in the world, but what justifies our knowledge is not some fact about the world, but it's some fact about us. Okay, so there's something in us, internal to us, that we can see justifies the knowledge we have of the world. The externalist view is that it is some fact about the world which justifies our knowledge. So it's, mental content externalism, sort of allows us to grasp, to come to know the world intelligently, and that's enough. We don't need to peer into ourselves and find some sort of justificatory reason, for the belief that we have, in order to affirm that belief about the thing. It's enough that we have that belief and it has been reliably derived from the world. So externalism and reliabilism tend to go hand in hand. And the example that's sometimes used is the thermometer example. So how do we know what temperature it is? Well, we just look at the thermometer, and the thermometer tells us it's a reliable tool for knowing things in the world. So the intellect is a reliable tool for knowing things in the world. Now, I think Aquinas is an externalist of sorts. I know, there's some toing and froing of, the post-Kantian readings of Aquinas here. Is he really an externalist, or is there some internalism going on in there with the agent intellect, so that, we do have justification by reflecting on the agent intellect? I think maybe, those approaches to Aquinas, some philosophy of mind, read him as, sort of too much in the tradition of affirming that there is something like a mind rather than just an intelligent agent. So the activity of the agent intellect is just the activity of the rational substance itself, and not the activity of some sort of thing such as a mind in the rational substance. But that's just kind of, we're getting sidetracked there. The point is that I do think Aquinas is an externalist, and that there, by and large, he is a reliabilist. So the agent intellect, the intellect is a reliable sort of, tool of the rational substance to come to a knowledge of the world. So that's grand, I think, and defensible. But is he a theological externalist? Now, theological externalism holds that the reason why our mental or cognitive capacities are reliable for giving us knowledge about the world is because God has designed us in that way so that they hook up naturally with the world. So it's by God's design that our mental capacities hook up with the world, and given that design, we can trust those capacities. We know that they are reliable because of God's design. Now, what I would say here is I would distinguish between knowing the reliability of our cognitive capacities and God's creating our cognitive capacities as reliable. Now, we don't need to know that God created our cognitive capacities as reliable in order to affirm that our cognitive capacities grasp the truth of things in the world. Okay? So we don't need to know that God created us and created us, as a good creator with all of these reliable capacities. I do think that is true, that God did create us with reliable capacities, but we don't need to know that in order to affirm those capacities as reliable. And if that's the case, then I don't think Aquinas is a theological externalist.
Yeah, and I'm interested on why not just say, ask the question, does Aquinas hold to externalism with reliabilist elements? So when the theological, that adjective there, is that meaning to get us back to the conversation on God's role in human knowledge as well? Is that why we talk about theological externalism rather than just externalism?
I think it's maybe to do with, the Cartesian position that, we only know that our clear and distinct ideas, latch on to reality is because God's good and wouldn't give us this faculty to deceive us. And I think it's maybe to do with that sort of tradition in philosophy. And given, obviously, for Aquinas, God is good, and absolutely he wouldn't, create us with an intellect which is going to deceive us. Does that feed into his externalism? My point is just that no, we don't need to know that in order to know that our cognitive capacities are reliable.
Yeah, and then maybe I'll just ask one question and then we'll move on, because I know some people will say, well, you said that God wouldn't create us with unreliable faculties, but it seems as if our mind or our intellect is sometimes unreliable, right? Would you say that there's a mistake going on when you say that? Or, how would you go about explaining human error in light of what you just said?
Yeah. So much of this occurred in the discussion that I had last night on the podcast. So it's all of it's quite fresh. So, the problem of error. You often, when we try to, in epistemology, when we try to account for error, say a hallucinatory experience, we become captivated or drawn to a kind of a view which distinguishes between knowing on the one hand and the content of knowledge on the other. And it holds that the content of an act of knowing is indifferent in a hallucinatory case and a non-hallucinatory case, so that there's no difference between the content in a hallucinatory case and a non-hallucinatory case. And so the problem is, how do we distinguish between a hallucinatory case and a non-hallucinatory case? And, that's the problem of error. So it tends to see that there's a highest common factor, as McDowell calls it, or some sort of representational content. It's representations which are common between hallucinatory and non-hallucinatory cases, veridical and non-veridical cases. Now, the problem with that, and this is something we explored last night, is that it presupposes that there can be an empty thought into which content enters. So it means that acts of thought don't differ systematically with that about which they are thoughts. So the act of thought is the same for every act of thought, and it's just the content that differs. So you can have thought, the example I used last night is that thought is like an empty shell and the content is like the nut put in the shell. Now, the problem with that is it runs up against something that can't be realized. Thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind. And the idea here is that a thought without a content is empty, is no thought at all. It's just not a thought. So thoughts are always contentful, okay? There is no distinction between the thought and the content of the thought. The thought is that formed content, that formed conceptual content. And where is it derived from? It's derived from our intuitions. Intuitions without concepts are blind. Okay, so think about that. What is it to be blind? It's to be in darkness. So there's no intelligibility to our intuitions without concepts. So the content of thought is the content of intuition. It's conceptual content, and we derive the content of intuition from sense experience. So sense experience is what gives basically content to thought, that formed conceptual content, without the distinction of the act of thought, like, you know, the nut and the shell. And that's generally that's the Kantian position. That's the position of the Pittsburgh school, and I will defend that's Aquinas's position. So what is it then? That causes a problem, because if the content of thought is derived from sense experience, you know, what about a hallucinatory experience? Okay, now I like the way McDowell addresses, you know, the kind of the problem of veridical and non-veridical experience, because McDowell points out that a hallucinatory experience and a non-hallucinatory experience, they're not the same thing. They're not the same experiences. Somebody who wants to really push, you know, kind of, you know, the high, you know, human knowing is unreliable, really wants to push that you know, there is no real difference between a hallucinatory and a non-hallucinatory experience. And that's why we worry so much about those non-veridical experiences. And that's what kind of, you know, drives that Cartesian method in the first meditation. But McDowell points out, of course, there's a difference between a hallucinatory and a non-hallucinatory experience. A non-hallucinatory experience its object is not any sort of object in the world. What has happened there is that something has occurred to produce some sort of, you know, fantastic experience, say of a pink elephant or something, but it's not of any sort of, you know, object in the world. Whereas a non-hallucinatory experience is an experience of an object in the world. So they're two quite different experiences, and they don't share anything in common. To think that they do share something in common is to revert back to that problematic view of mentality, which holds that there can be an empty thought into which content enters, as if it was an empty house into which objects enter, or an empty shell into which the nut enters. But that's a problematic view about mentality that we need to abandon. So having abandoned that, then there's nothing in common between a hallucinatory and a non-hallucinatory experience. So what is problematic then about the two? We just have to, you know, figure out what went wrong in the hallucinatory experience. And usually, you know, it's quite easy to do that. You know, we ate something that was off. You know, we had a head full of acid. We were drunk. We had a concussion, and we can do that. Hallucinatory experiences tend to be quite distinctive, and we know them when they occur, because when we come back down to earth, we see them as aberrations in our experience, whereas non-hallucinatory experiences are straightforward experiences of the world. So with that in place, we can still say that human knowing is a reliable faculty that we have, because in the hallucinatory experiences, some sort of causal process has gone on to bring about this hallucinatory experience. Whereas whenever that, you know, sort of aberrant causal process doesn't go on, our knowing just engages with things in the world.
Yeah. So for instance, like, I don't know, maybe to use an analogy, like my legs are reliable at locomotion. They're reliable at getting me around. But if like someone takes a hammer to my leg, it's not the leg that's the problem, but the damage that was inflicted upon it.
Yeah. And that's the perfect analogy for that position that McDowell and others defend, called disjunctivism. And disjunctivism is that with hallucinatory and non-hallucinatory experience, you know, you have one state of affairs going on in one case and a different state of affairs going on in the other case. You know, so with the legs working, you have one state of affairs where the legs work. When the legs aren't working, it's not their fault. Somebody's taking a hammer to your legs. So that's a different state of affairs.
All right, nice. All right, question 8. Do accidents possess their own active existence apart from the act of existence of the substance? And then, this is from N. Hunter Olson. And then he adds in, I've been thinking about this with respect to transubstantiation.
Yeah, very good. So nice shout out to Hunter there. So I've been on Hunter's podcast a few times, you know. So he pressed me the last time just on participation and, you know, the 20th century model participation in Thomism. So it was great fun doing that. I really enjoyed it. So just a bit of a shout out to Hunter there. So do accidents possess their own active existence? What is an accident? Okay, so we distinguish between substance and accidents. Substances are things such that it is of their nature to exist in themselves. Okay, they don't exist through another; they exist in themselves. Now, we're not talking about their active existence here. We're just talking about those as things that exist. Okay, so they are independent things existing through themselves. Okay, whereas accidents are such that it's of their nature not to exist through themselves, but to exist through another, i.e., they're accidents of a substance. So an accident is a modification of some substance. So the being of an accident is the being of the substance, which is thereby modified. And so any being that the accident has, it draws its being from the substance whose accident it is. So an accident doesn't have its own active existence, its own esse, but it participates in the active existence or the esse of the substance. So when we talk about accidental esse, we're talking about the esse that the accidents have through participating in the substance, but they don't have it as a distinct active existence, distinct from the substance's active existence. What about transubstantiation? Because in transubstantiation, the substance of the bread and the wine are gone. Okay, and in their place, it's Christ's body and blood, soul and divinity. Okay, but it's not the case that those accidents are depending on Christ's body and blood, soul and divinity in the Eucharist. Okay, so that's the thing. So the accidents are not inhering in Christ's body and blood, soul and divinity, and they're not inhering in the bread and the wine. So how is it that the accidents are still there? Well, this is a miracle. Okay, this is a case of God's preserving the accidents in being without any substance in which to preserve them. And God can do that. That's something that God can do. And Thomas in Summa Theologiae Tertia Pars, question 77, article 1, that's the answer he gives. That in every case of transubstantiation, in every case of the Eucharist occurring, yes, it's a miracle because it's Christ's body and blood, soul and divinity, and we are in awe of that, the real presence. But let's not also forget the other sort of little minor miracle of God preserving the accidents in being without a subject of the accident.
Yeah, and so just real quick though, so for instance, accidents generally, just accidents are parasitic, let's say, upon substance, right?
Yeah.
And so if the substance is changed, we would say that usually speaking, the accidents go too, right? But then in the case of the Eucharist and transubstantiation, God preserves the accidents without so the accidents of bread and wine without the bread and wine substantially being there anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then someone might ask, like, how is that not a contradiction or something like that in the metaphysical system that we have of the substance accident distinction?
Well, accidents just need something. They're dependent on something else for their being.
I see. Okay.
In the normal run of things, it's the substance. But given that it's just the case that accidents need something on which to depend for their being, why can't God, preserve them in existence just through his omnipotence? So they still are dependent on something else.
Right, okay.
It's just God's omnipotence, causality in this case, rather than typically their substance.
All right, nice. All right, question 9. Wow, that makes me appreciate, I already appreciate the Eucharist immensely, but now the minor quote unquote miracle, that's also something to think about. Wow, it's incredible. Okay, number 9. How does Aquinas account for accidental changes in separated substances without spiritual matter, like Bonaventure? The distinction between essence and existence accounts for the potency to exist, but what of the potency to think about this or that? So I think those are two questions in one. And this is from Callum Savage.
Yeah. So what sort of accidental changes do we have in separated substances? Okay, so these are typically intellectual changes. So separate substances, they're pure intellects. So the angels are pure intellects, but they don't exist per se. So they're not pure existence itself. So there is some potency in the angels. There is the potency that they have to existence, but there's also the potency and intellectual potency that they have to what is intelligible, because only God, okay, doesn't stand in potency to anything. So only God doesn't stand in potency to, something to illuminate him. We were talking about God's knowledge earlier. He doesn't draw his knowledge from things. His knowledge, the intelligible species, is the divine essence itself. is not the case for the angels. The angels do stand in potency to what is intelligible, and they're informed by what is intelligible. Now, they're informed by what is intelligible from the first moment of their being, okay? But nevertheless, there is still a potency that they have standing to something intelligible. Now, the intelligible forms to which the intellectual substances stand in potency, they're not material forms. They're intelligible form. They're immaterial forms. And God illuminates the intellect of the angel by these immaterial forms. And in being illuminated by these immaterial forms, they can understand, whatever God wants them to understand in material creation. Okay, so they understand the lower by means of the higher. So given that they're immaterial forms, there's no need for the angel's intellect to be material at all to receive these forms. And, this is the case in human cognition as well. A sign of our intelligence is the immateriality of our act of knowing, because whatever receives a form from a thing distinct from itself, if it becomes that thing, it's unintelligent. But if it doesn't become that thing, but remains the thing that it is, but can receive a form distinct from itself, then it's intelligent in some way, yes. But in being able to receive the form without becoming the thing, it means that in which the form is received is not material. Because if it were material, it would become duly informed and transform into that thing. So when the tree receives the form of a door or a plank or whatever, it ceases to be a tree and becomes that of which it's been informed. But when I receive the form of a tree, I don't become a tree. So that in me, which receives the form of a tree, isn't material, and so is not materially informed by the form of a tree. Well, so much more for the angel, because the angel receives immaterial forms, and as intelligent, the angel is immaterial because that's the sign of intelligence. So, there doesn't need to be any sort of spiritual matter in the angel to receive those forms. Now, they have the knowledge that they have through beholding God. Okay, so they behold the divine essence, and that's how they get the knowledge that they have. Whilst they are always actually beholding God, they're not always actually contemplating what is contained within their knowledge. Okay, so we could be beholding God, right? But we may not always be contemplating what's in our knowledge. And we know this from human cognition as well. We may, be thinking about some issue in Aquinas' metaphysics, but we maybe aren't thinking about this, that, or the other issue. Okay, we may be focused on one thing, but there's other things which pertain to it and fall under it that we're not thinking about. And that can be the case for the angel. Okay, so there can be potency there. And also angels can grow in illuminative knowledge. God can illuminate them in deeper ways about, say, the mysteries of redemption, let's say. So God can illuminate the intellect of an angel through the mysteries of redemption. And also, I think it's the case, I'm not a specialist on angelology, but I think it's the case that a higher angel is able to illuminate a lower angel as well. So whilst the lower angel is illuminated, a higher angel can illuminate it to a greater extent. So there's potentiality there for change.
And so then when you answer the question, the distinction between essence and existence, he asked the question, how does the distinction between essence and existence account for the potency? How does it account for the potency to think about this or that? Your point was that, could you remind me again what your point was on, at least with respect to that real distinction?
Yeah, so the distinction between essence and existence, that's the potency for the angel to exist. But the essence itself is an intellectual essence.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
Pure intellect. And so it has an intellectual potency to form.
All right, good. Yeah, and then so when Bonaventure talks about then spiritual matter, that was kind of the universal hylomorphism that Aquinas was rejecting in the De Ente, correct?
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, number 10. This is from Thurston Shaylor. He asked, if something is subsistent and immaterial, is it an intellect? If so, why?
Yeah, and we've kind of gone over some of that material in the previous question, that whatever is immaterial is intellectual, and this is because whatever is immaterial can receive the forms of things distinct from itself without becoming those things. So it's not a material reception of form, but it's an immaterial reception of form, and that's what it is to be intelligent. So it's to have, one's intentionality focused on the forms of other things without becoming those things. That's what it is to be intelligent. So if you have something which is subsistent and is like that, then it's an intellect or an intellectual substance.
Yeah, and then what do we mean by subsistent for the audience?
So what we just mean something which is a substance. That's it. So remains in being, not remaining in existence, but it just remains what it is. It subsists as the thing that it is. So I subsist as a human being. I continue to exist. Okay, I'm continually caused to exist by God. I have my existence, participate in that from God, but I continue to exist, as a man. That's simply what we mean by subsist.
Yeah, and then also one question that I have really quick is that, so being subsistent and immaterial, is it an intellect? I mean, these are necessary and sufficient, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it is that exhaustive, or are there other things that you could probably add in there?
How do you mean?
Like, for instance, like, okay, so yeah, if you have something subsistent and immaterial, then you have an intellect, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's necessary and that's sufficient,
Mm-hmm.
Do you like, could you break that down even further and maybe say something about about subsistence or about immateriality, or if you just say those two, that's enough?
I think that's enough. I mean,
Okay.
the only immaterial substances that exist are intellectual substances. Anything else which is immaterial isn't a substance. Numbers,
Right,
they're
yeah.
usually the abstract objects. They're not substances. They're either thoughts in the mind of God, and thus possibilities of being, or thoughts in our own minds, but in reality, existent in individually in physical things.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Sorry if that was a dumb question.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is now our last question, and it's from Andrew Joseph Villalobos.
Mm-hmm.
He asks, what are, okay, and this is his being Gavin's. What are Gavin's thoughts, or his thoughts, on the definition of a transcendental? And then I'll add this one last question. From Andrew. Does metaphysics reduce to discussions of the transcendentals, as the late Thomist Jan A. Ersten made?
Yeah. So very good. So the first question, so the definition of a transcendental is something that's convertible with being. It doesn't just coincide with being, it's convertible with being, and it signifies a distinct sense of being. So the typical examples of the transcendentals are unity, truth, and goodness. So unity, truth, and goodness are convertible with being. They're found everywhere the being is found, but they don't just coincide with being. They need to be convertible with being. They express distinct senses of being, but they referentially are identical to being. So that's what it is to be a transcendental. Now, does metaphysics reduce to discussions of the transcendentals, as the late Thomist Ersten made? So earlier when we were talking about thinking metaphysically about things, I used a term called separatio that Aquinas uses in his commentary on the De Trinitate of Boethius. Now, in that commentary, Aquinas breaks down the sciences on the basis of their subject matters, and each science is distinguished on the basis of what is knowable and how it investigates what is knowable. So physics or natural science investigates those things that depend on matter and motion for their being and for their being understood. Mathematics considers those things that depend on matter and motion for their being, but not for their being understood. And metaphysics depends, the divine science or theology considers those things that don't depend on matter and motion for their being or for their being understood, i.e. immaterial things. Then Aquinas distinguishes there are some immaterial things which are positively immaterial. They're immaterial substances, God and angels. And then there's some things which are immaterial, and whilst they're found within material things, it's not of their nature to be found in immaterial things. So they don't have to be in immaterial things, yet we do see them amongst immaterial things. So God and the angels, that's studied in revealed theology, whereas those things which don't have to be amongst material things, but can be immaterial in themselves, but can be found amongst material things, that's what metaphysics, the divine science of the philosopher, considers. Okay. Now, there's a special intellectual operation proper to, these sciences. The first two sciences, they abstract, okay, their subject matter from things in the world, And that's properly abstraction, because their subject matter is found to be amongst material things and dependent on matter in some sort of way. So in physics, the objects of physics depend on matter, both for their being and for their being understood. In mathematics, mathematical objects depend on matter for their being. So whilst we can understand circles and squares and all that without their matter, circles and squares and all that, they don't exist without matter. Okay, so we're not Platonists here, at least in this respect. But when it comes to metaphysics, so that's abstraction. We need to abstract or pass over the materiality of things in order to think about these objects in physics and mathematics. But when it comes to the subject matter of metaphysics, separatio, because that subject matter in itself is immaterial, but can be found in material things, we separate these. We don't just abstract them. We're not just passing over the material conditions. We're separating the subject matter from the material conditions. And Thomas gives examples: substance, potency, form, act, unity, all that. So separatio, Thomas says, is the cognitional operation by which we focus on the subject matter of metaphysics. Now, Thurston, on the other hand, he held that resolutio is the operation by which we get to the subject matter of metaphysics. And what's resolutio? This is where we resolve our various concepts into their most fundamental. Okay, we resolve all of our various concepts into the most fundamental. What is the most fundamental? What is it that the intellect first conceives? It's ends, or being. And if that which the intellect first conceives is being, then all of our concepts are resolved into the general notion of being. And what can we say about the general notion of being? Well, it's convertible with unity, truth, and goodness. So if metaphysics is characterized by resolutio, the resolution of all of our concepts into the most fundamental, which is being, then metaphysics is concerned with being, and unity, truth, and goodness as the transcendental properties of being. I think that reading, whilst it is in Aquinas, and so it's the metaphysician who considers being and the transcendentals, it overlooks separatio as, the particularly metaphysical way of thinking about beings in terms of their substance, potency, form, act, and all the rest. So I think Thurston's view just overlooks separatio as a distinctive activity. And also, when you just read Aquinas' metaphysics, there's very little that he has to say on the transcendentals, despite the fact that Thurston's book is like that thick. There's very little that he does say in the transcendentals, but there is an awful lot in metaphysics that he says about substance, potency, form, act, essence, existence, unity, all of that. I don't think metaphysics reduces to discussions of the transcendentals. I think there are discussions of the transcendentals and they have a place, but there are also discussions of non-transcendental yet genuinely metaphysical realities in Aquinas' metaphysics as well. So I wouldn't go all the way with Thurston there.
Yeah, so then you have a clear counterexample then to kind of what his view is.
Yeah. Now, I will point out that Rudy Tevelde has recently just released a book, Metaphysics and Transcendence, something along those lines, and it's on Thomistic Aquinas' metaphysics, in which he defends Thurston's view. And interestingly, Tevelde, devotes the whole chapter to separatio, but he defends Thurston's view, and he works that material in separatio in. So he would be, a defender of the Thurston view. I wouldn't be as convinced of Thurston's view.
Have you had the chance to read that work, by the way, or did you just know that it was released and had those contents?
I'm reviewing it.
Oh yeah,
minute, so
awesome.
I'm working my way through it. So.
Oh, this is good. Yeah, I want to read that review once you're done.
Yeah.
Well,
it's going to be positive. It'll be okay. All my reviews are positive.
Yeah, and also you're not saying that the person who disagrees with you is dumb. I mean, that's the first question that we asked you, right? Yeah, of course. Well, Gavin, thank you so much for this conversation. I had a blast, and it's a good way to get started again. And Gavin, let's see here. What time is it now in Ireland for you?
It's 10:30.
Okay. Well, okay. So that's actually pretty reasonable. What time are you waking up to get ready for this match?
For training tomorrow?
Yeah. Oh yeah, training.
It's just a private lesson. Yeah. So I get up about 5 o'clock in the morning. So get up, get myself ready, get my prayers done, just make sure that my body is still hanging together and all of that, and then mentally prepare myself for the training. It's going to be fun because we haven't done much sparring in the last few weeks. A lot of it's been technical stuff. So he did say the evening that we might do a few rounds. So looking forward to that. Get punched in the face and tied up and sat on and hurt in lots of different ways. It's a good start to your weekend. It'll prepare me for the football on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, Gavin, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I had a great time talking to you. Yeah. So, Gavin, you're working on your book on the resurrection, and how's that coming along?
Yeah. So that book is transformed into a book on classical theism in general. Ooh. So the resurrection material is going to be part and parcel of a larger book on classical theism. So I thought it's not enough just to write about the resurrection. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to put it in the context of Aquinas' classical theism. So I've got about 50,000 words done. So June is the busy month, just with things tying up for the college. Come the start of July, just the start of this week there, when things sort of died down, everything finished, I was getting about 5,000 words a day written. So there's 2 books I'm writing at the minute. It's the classical theism book, and then co-authoring a book with Pat Flynn on the 5 ways. So each day I contribute to one or other of those books. So I was getting 5,000 words a day written right up until yesterday. And then today is kind of, my not my day off from work, but my day off from writing, so I can get a bit of reading done. So I've got about 50,000 words on the classical theism book. I'm onto the chapter on God as a causal agent, God's operations of intellect, will, and power. Then the next few chapters are going to be creation. And when I get on to the creation of man, that's when I'm going to start laying out the material on the constitution of man, how man can survive death, and whether or not there can be any hope of man's survival after death. And that's going to get me into resurrection, redemption, that sort of stuff. So all that stuff that I did on resurrection, then I can just tack on to the end of what I'm doing in the next few chapters.
Oh, that's awesome, Gavin. And so I'll let you go now, and I'll wish you a good night. And so, yeah, thank you to everyone who's been watching Intellectual Conservatism. You can follow me on Patreon. You can follow me on Facebook, on social media, and have a great night.
Yep. Thank you. You too.